All right, Donald Trump is in pursuit of peace. We know that as he's working on a ceasefire deal with Ukraine. We know that because of the deals he's working on in Gaza. He's trying to bring peace to places well beyond the borders of this country. And one of the places that's been most problematic for America, of course, over the last many years, the nation of Iran. The regime in Tehran has been a state sponsor of terrorism. We know that. It's created proxy issues. It's created conflict between the United States and Iran for years, but it doesn't have to be that way. So says my next guest, Alireza, Jafarzadeh. He serves as the deputy director of the Washington office of the National Council of Resistance of Iran, NCRI, and he's also the author of The Iran Threat. You can find that written on MacMillan Books in 2008. Sir, good to have you back. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Steve. Always a pleasure to be on the show.
So let me ask you about this. Donald Trump has obviously brought a new attitude to the White House. His administration is working all over the world. I see prisoners released from Russia. I see ceasefire deals being put together in Saudi Arabia for what's happening in Ukraine. I see attempts being made to reshuffle the deck in Gaza and try something different. Do you think this is a positive for the world, Donald Trump's reemergence on the world stage?
Well, definitely. I think all of the things you explained, just add that to really how this is all overlapping with the realities on the ground. There are new realities on the ground when it comes to inside Iran, but also in the region. It's been very clear now, especially after October 7, that the head of the snake of war and terror lies in Tehran. But look at just the past few months, how the Iran regime's influence in the region, with their proxies, has really gone down. They've lost Hezbollah. They've lost their biggest ally, Assad in Syria. Much of their clout in among the Shia militias in Iraq and other parts of the region is gone. That's a clear weakness of the regime. And I think so does the opportunity for change in Iran. I think the president is right to call for ending the entire nuclear weapons program of the Iranian regime. There is a very clear possibility for that. And also what is really working in favor of that approach is the potential for change inside Iran. The regime is not just weak in the region, but also inside.
Yeah, let me ask you this, Alireza. If there was a change in who's running Iran, if there was a change in the regime, and you return to a democratic republic or something, at least in that neighborhood, do you think the nation of Iran could live in peace with Israel and bring peace and stability to the Middle East? We haven't had it in a number of decades. There's always skirmishes. There's always fighting and periodic bloodshed and bigger blowups like we had October 7th and everything since then in Gaza. There's got to be a path forward to peace, and it has to include Iran, I believe. Do you think we can get there, at least if we change the regime?
Absolutely. I mean, in fact, the only path to peace is to end the rule of the clerics in Iran, not just the issue of peace, but also the nuclear threat of the Iranian regime. Remember, the people of Iran are actually a very peaceful nation. It was the mullahs that picked the fight with all their neighbors there. Since the day that Khomeini took power in Iran, in February 1979, he had this, agenda of exporting what he called the Islamic Revolution, which really had nothing to do with the religion. It was just like basically a way to stay in power. This regime was not in line with the aspirations of the people of Iran. That's why right now, as we speak, in all 31 provinces, you have had 9 rounds of major uprisings since 2018. There is a very powerful organized resistance named the National Council of Resistance of Iran, with the network inside the country. They have a platform known as the 10-point platform for the future of Iran that not only talks about the separation of religion and state and ballot box being the only criteria for legitimacy, free market economy, but they also talk about peace in the Middle East. They are in favor of peace in the Middle East, but also a non-nuclear republic Iran. By the way, this is the movement that exposed all the major nuclear sites of Iran. They represent basically the sentiment, the views of the people of Iran, which are opposed to what the regime is doing in the region. But I'd love to.
So what you're saying is, I want to jump in there. I mean, a lot to unpack there. But you said, let me take one of the big takeaways right there at the end. The people of Iran really don't want to be a nuclear power. They want to be a good neighbor. They want to be friends with people in the Middle East. They don't want to be a nuclear power necessarily. Is that what you're telling me?
Absolutely. I mean, this is not about even nuclear energy or anything like that. Since day one, the nuclear program of Iran has been about nuclear weapons. And that has really drained all of the resources of the country. The regime spent $2 trillion on their nuclear weapons program. For what purpose? It has no benefit for the people of Iran. To the contrary, it has been to the detriment of them. Iran is a very rich country. We have the second largest oil and gas reserves combined in the world. Yet 80% of the Iranian population live below the poverty line. Where does the money go? It goes to the nuclear weapons program. It goes to the proxies. It goes to Hezbollah. It goes to the Houthis. $50 billion they gave to Assad to keep them in power. That's why the people of Iran are in sharp contrast with what the regime represents. And that's why the movement for change in Iran has never had this level of momentum.
What's it going to take,
regime
though?
has never been so weak.
Alireza, what's it going to take? I mean, look, it's no secret. People that resist Tehran, that resist the regime, they're shot. They're hung, they're stoned to death, they're murdered. Doesn't matter. They're not there. They're silenced permanently. Their voices are silenced permanently. You speak up in Iran, you have a very short lifespan. How do you get past that? How do you and others make it possible for Iran to come back into the League of Civilized Nations?
Well, when you have the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism that stays in power through terrorism and executions, the only way really left for the population is to confront the regime, to fight back. You saw the protests in Iran, and it's definitely going to come back. It's just a matter of how and when. But also there is an organized resistance that has paid a very high price. Let me show you a book right here, right in front of me. This is a very thick book. You can see how thick it is. It contains the names and pictures of 20,000 of those from this movement who have been killed by Iran regime. Names and particulars, pictures. This is the price that has been paid in order to bring about freedom. It's not going to happen by itself. They have what they call resistance units on the ground that are confronting the Revolutionary Guards. Now, what should the outside world do? Because the responsibility for bringing down the regime is basically the people of Iran. There's no need for boots on the ground or appropriation of money. But the outside world, especially the United States and Europe, can play their role, how imposing sanctions on the Iranian regime, holding them accountable for their crimes in Iran, but also their terrorism and their nuclear weapons program, and recognize the right of the people of Iran to overthrow the regime, recognize the legitimacy of those resistance units on the ground to confront the Revolutionary Guards, because that's the only way you can bring down the Ayatollahs. So there is a concerted effort needed, both on the part of those on the ground in Iran, namely these resistance units, but also outside of the country. Interestingly, there was a huge rally in front of the Capitol marching towards the White House just this past Saturday. Right. Thousands of Iranian Americans had come there. Mayor Giuliani actually was there, and he made that same point, that this is what the U.S. should do, because everything else is out there. The platform for change is there. There is a very viable leadership. Actually, the leader is actually a woman, Mrs. Mariam Rajabi, who introduced that 10-point platform, who calls for gender equality and banning everything related to the Iranian regime, closing all of the nuclear sites of Iran. That prospect is really is right in front of us. Which this is the time that we should go for the win.
Well, I look. I'm old enough to remember all of the days of 1979 and 1980, 444 days of hostages. I mean, I remember it all. I wish you the very best in success in these efforts, Alireza. I mean, if Iran would come back into the League of Civilized Nations, as I mentioned earlier, I think it would be a game changer, not just for the Middle East, but for a lot of instability around the world. I think it would bring in a lot of opportunities for peace. I'll give you the last word.
Well, Steve, I think you gave the last word yourself. That's the best thing you could have said. just think for a moment the prospect of a free Iran, democratic Iran, a republic form of government where the vote of people counts, that a non-belligerent, non-nuclear republic Iran,
Right.
what an impact it will have in the whole region and the whole world. And
Yes.
this is going to happen, and now is the time.
Alireza Jafarzadeh, Deputy Director of the Washington Office of the National Council of Resistance of Iran. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Steve. Always a pleasure.
And thank you for joining us here today. You can find out more at stevegruber.com. Read, and learn more, and follow me on social media, on X, on Facebook, on Instagram, on Getter, on Parler, on all of them. At Steve Gruber Show. Go look it up. Stay informed, and we'll talk very soon.